Matt Taibbi and Briahna Joy Gray had a little dust-up, little scuffle, little throwdown on the Rising show. It all started when a tweet from someone I had never heard of, April Harding, put out a summary of Matt Taibbi's answer to a question: why doesn't he pay much attention to the sins or threats from the right? He gave a great answer. This is according to who? Now, who he gave the answer to, what the forum was. I was a little skeptical
I was under
of
the
this.
impression that he put this on notes and she copied it to Twitter because for reasons we're going to get into here, he doesn't use Twitter anymore.
Right. Okay. There you go. So this was from Twitter. From Substack notes that she copied over to Twitter. So why I don't spend a lot of time on the Republicans. One, there is an enormous army of mainstream media reporters already going after them from every angle, with most major news organizations a little more than proxies for the DNC, to the point where stations hire Biden spokespeople as anchors. Two, the Republicans have very little institutional power nationally. It's not their point of view prevailing in schools, on campuses, in newsrooms where over 90% of working reporters vote blue, and specifically in the intelligence and military apparatus, which has openly aligned itself with Democrats. Even if Donald Trump were a threat to democracy, he lacks the institutional pull to do much damage, which can't be said of Democrats. That's his answer. I agree somewhat with that and disagree somewhat with that. I mean, Trump has the court. He'll have a Republican majority. But in terms of the sort of extra political institutions like the FBI, right, and, academia, media, finance, yes, they will be working against him. So the Democrats' ambitions are significantly more dangerous than those of the Republicans, from digital surveillance to censorship to making intel and enforcement agencies central players in domestic governance, all plans being executed globally as well as in our one country. They are thinking on a much bigger and more dangerous scale than Republicans. I lived in third world countries, and the endless criminal indictments of people like Trump and ongoing lawfare efforts to prevent even third-party challengers are classic authoritarian symptoms. The Republicans aren't near this kind of capability. Last and most important, the Democrats are being organized around a more potent but also much dumber, more cult-like ideology. People like Yuval Harari and his transhumanist divinity concept scare me a lot more than the Republicans, and I was once undercover in an apocalyptic church in Texas. Ask your average Russian or Cuban what overempowered pseudo-intellectuals are capable of. I have a pretty good record of picking dangerous phenomena ahead of time. I feel confident on this one. And that's before we get to the demographic/class shifts in the parties. Okay, so that prompted backlash from Zed Galani on Twitter. They got into a little dust-up about this. And that was the subject of a Rising video that came out before they brought Matt Taibbi on. But just to give a little background before we get into that, even, as we could see, Briahna Joy Gray kind of had a bit of a hard-on for this whole Twitter Files project going back to basically when they first came out. So, Russell, do you want to just briefly explain what these are, and then we'll get to the video?
Yeah, so Briahna has been attacking the Twitter Files pretty much since the day they broke. She had a pretty famous exchange with Taibbi, accusing him essentially, which she does again in this segment, of not looking for malfeasance against the left, of specifically looking for malfeasance against the right, an accusation which, in addition to being insulting and intellectually dishonest, has absolutely no basis in any evidence that she has and really doesn't make any sense in the context of Taibbi's past career. So she had Greenwald on her show, and Greenwald said, the only information that you end up getting is information they decide to give you. That can end up putting me in the position where I'm unwittingly serving as a spokesperson for an agenda that's not mine. And this was in response, according to Briahna, of her asking him if he'd shepherd a Twitter Files release. But then when she tried to use him to bolster her argument, he quickly clarified. To put this in full context, all journalism is based on what sources provide, except if you have full access to government corporate files. This is always the case. What Taibbi et al. Reported was highly newsworthy on its own. Fang, talking about Li Fang, today said he had full access and no limits. When Daniel Ellsberg gave the Pentagon Papers to the New York Times, How did they know he didn't omit things? They didn't, but they knew that what he provided standing alone was newsworthy. Same with Snowden, the Brazil archive, WikiLeaks, or when New York Times, CNN report what CIA tell them to say. For System Update, we interviewed 4, maybe 5 journalists who reported Twitter files. They all said the same. Nobody from Twitter paid them. There were no restrictions on what they could say or report. Nothing compromised their editorial independence. So he smacked that down right away. But as soon as Taibbi, this came out with Taibbi, which if you know Briahna, she probably didn't like that statement in and of itself, and she decided to open up litigating the Twitter files again.
Right. So first we're going to go to the segment that they did a little while back, which is about a week ago, would be my guess, where Zed Galani got into a dust-up with Taibbi on Twitter. We're doing this as the video because Galani recently deleted a lot of these tweets, and so luckily Robbie was able to read them for us before they disappeared into the Internet Archive. So here is the highlights of the segment that prompted this latest return of Taibbi to the show.
Said Galani, former reporter at The Intercept, criticized Taibbi, writing on X, "You're just rationalizing pandering to the millions of right-wing subscribers. Sorry, the millions that right-wing subscribers give you. There are millions of people without health care in the American South because of GOP Medicaid blockade, but not as important as libs of TikTok censorship." Notice how Matt keeps saying, "I covered this thing in the past." That's exactly what I'm saying. He stopped covering these beats to pander to his new audience that made him a millionaire. He doesn't touch Palestine for the same reason, despite writing about it previously. The fact he has an overwhelmingly right-wing readership means it's even more valuable for him to cover something besides right-wing beats, but he's going the easy route, the one that makes him money, unquote.
To this, Matt responded, quote, "Zed, WTF is wrong with you? You really think there aren't enough people covering Republicans and suggesting I work for the RNC? I don't remember this kind of SHIT when I mostly covered Republicans for 20 years. I'm pointing out that I paid dues and earned the right to pick which stories I think are more important, and giving me a hard time about criminal justice issues. It's particularly ridiculous when you've done anywhere near as much work there as I have. Let me know. Also, I don't concede that the last year plus of stories like the Twitter files have been partisan. That only makes sense if you concede the Democrats have abandoned the First Amendment. 15 years ago, I'd have been accused of being too liberal for the same material," unquote. Interestingly, Zed deleted some of those tweets.
Okay, so this is later in the segment. I put the little flash edit there. Okay, so there's just a brief summation of the dust up and the pushback. Now here's Briahna adding her takes on top of it. And everything she's about to say, by the way, is wrong. Everything she says here, from here to the end, we're going to play it straight through, is totally wrong, as Taibbi shows when he gets on the show. But go ahead. Do you have anything quick?
Yeah, and let me just say, because what Galani really accused Taibbi of is being captured by his audience, claiming that he's become a millionaire from his right-wing audience. I question that contention. I mean, I've been a subscriber to Taibbi for a very long time. I'm not right-wing. Nobody that I know who subscribes to Taibbi is someone I would describe as right wing. You know, that is really falling into the definition of right wing that the censors want you to have. Anybody who's for free speech. So they're all right wing. Like I don't know where you'd. It's not like Taibbi and does a lot of ranting and raving about fast food workers getting a raise. So why would he have a right wing audience? Like, why are you even assuming that?
Well, we'll get into that as the main video plays. But here are some of Bree's arguments that, and like I said, just about everything she says here is not correct. We're not going to keep stopping because we're going to get to the main video. But here it is.
Of those tweets,
Matt Taibbi has admitted that he has declined to criticize Musk publicly in a series of private DMs that he released just a month or so ago.
Wrong.
He said to him on April of last year, "Elon, I've repeatedly declined to criticize you and have nothing to do with your beef with Substack." This is when they were feuding over that. "Is there a reason why I'm being put in the middle of these things, etc.?" And Matt has also not only admitted that he's declined to criticize Musk because he wanted to keep getting information reporting on the Twitter files. And I don't say that nefariously. I think that it is something that journalists have to weigh. It's described as access journalism, but there's a bit of a push and pull of how much am I going to be willing to put up with to get newsworthy information that is of the public interest? Do I want to throw it all away for a personal peccadillo? I completely get that. But that kind of admission timed so long after the substantial bulk of the Twitter files papers had been released.
Wrong.
And him to date still not really criticizing Elon Musk openly on any number of these issues does seem to suggest that maybe there's something other than just trying to preserve his relationship for the sake of journalism. In the text exchange that I just read, Matt Taibbi was asking him if he had been shadow banned, and Elon Musk did not deny it. He replied to that Taibbi text, "You are dead to me. Please get off Twitter and just stay on Substack." So this is a contemporary instance where Taibbi has evidence that he is censoring a major reporter like Matt Taibbi and has declined until Elon leaked some of this exchange, declined for a year, almost a year, to actually tell the public of this. Is that not an important censorship story to cover as well? If you are, and this is related to what we were just talking about, if you are substantively and genuinely committed in looking at censorship campaigns, you are going to at least do an investigation, do a search, do a word search that is broader than just terms that are associated with attacks on the right. And when I interviewed him on my show, I was really surprised because Taibbi was kind of like a Bernie guy. I was surprised that he didn't, even out of the Vegas curiosity, put Bernie or any of those other 2016 or 2020 related search terms into it to even see if there was any censorship happening. Now, maybe there wasn't, and that this is me and the left having a sense of our outside importance. And maybe it is true that the censorship against the left isn't as big as the censorship against the right because the left is not as powerful as the right. That might be true. But if you never even looked, you cannot make that claim.
Okay, see, I take it back. I said everything she said there was wrong. No, she actually said one thing right, which is that she has an inflated view of the left's relevance. So see how I said she got everything wrong there, and then once the facts bore out that she actually said something true, I say, my mistake, my bad. I said she got everything wrong. She said something right. That's all she had to do in this situation, and this wouldn't have blown up the way it did. But she didn't. So that was just a barrage of lies. I mean, that was nonsense. Yeah, it was all nonsense. So we're going to explain why.
Which especially to be saying this now when the facts have been pretty well established. I mean, Taibbi has responded to some of what she's mentioning, like the idea. First of all, Glenn already knocked down the whole premise. Like, what if it was selective? Would you not have taken the Pentagon Papers because you don't know what has been emphasized and what you're given? Do you not print the Pentagon Papers for that reason? So it's already knocked down on that basis. So why are you even talking about it? But Taibbi has also responded to this idea that they were led one way or the other. And he said, listen, it's possible, but they would be, Musk had just taken over when he started the Twitter files. And he was saying these were 100,000 emails that took us months to go through. So the idea that they would, because they would drop 20,000 or another 20,000, the idea that they were able to vet all of those before they gave them to you is highly improbable.
All right, let's take a look now. So now, because of that, they bring Taibbi back on to clear the air on these things. So let's take a look. This is a lot of video here, but part of what we have to demonstrate here is her refusal to just simply admit that she got some things wrong, and that would have been that. But anyway, let's get started.
I understand that you think that I and Zed Galani, in my attempt to articulate what Zed Galani's position was, got some things wrong. Where do you think we erred?
Well, Briahna, I mean, obviously, I don't want to be difficult about this, but there were a bunch of things on your show that were, I thought, were concerning. Number one, you said that I waited a year to tell everybody what happened with Elon. I actually didn't do that. I announced it the day that it happened in an article that I know that you read because you've referenced it on the air before. I talked about being placed under a blanket search ban and all the other things that had been done, including the removal of the Twitter file stories. So the notion that I didn't tell the world that influential journalists had been censored, that's not true. I've done that repeatedly in the last year, and I did it as soon as it happened in my case. It's also not true that I've declined to criticize him in the past year, and that I've still declined to do so. I've done it fairly regularly, as a matter of fact. Some of those instances have actually kind of gone viral. I gave an interview to Chris Cuomo, for instance, where I talked about how he's been a big disappointment in free speech. I've gone after him on his own platform, calling him out multiple times in the last year. Another thing that I found was concerning, you said that when I was declining to answer questions, for instance, that things that Mehdi Hassan was asking me about, say, for instance, Elon's speech policies with India, you said that the Twitter file searches had been done and that as far as you understood it, we had gotten them all in one cache at the beginning of the process. I don't know where you got that from. I'm actually curious to ask, because that wasn't the case. We had multiple, it was dozens of different document dumps, and we were getting them at different times, and I was actually due to get results right up until the moment that Elon had his meltdown and I was cut out of the process.
Let's take those two. Let's take both of those, Taibbi. So 100%, I'm not as clear on the timeline of how these things happened as you, but the core point that I was articulating and that I think was reflected in some of the pushback that you've been getting is that we have from you in
those aren't core point issues. Those are fact issues.
I completely concede them. I have no investment in a misstatement that I made. So I want to get to what I meant.
That's
I completely
really
concede.
quite a thing for a reporter or a commentator to say
that way. Yes,
I have no investment in a misstatement that I made. You should have an investment in the misstatement that you made. You should just correct it. Right. The core point and the timeline are the same thing. Her point had everything to do with the timeline. She said that Taibbi did not criticize Elon Musk for a full year after the Twitter files fell apart. That is absolutely
untrue. Which is so transparently false. I can't even believe she went on her show and said that.
He did not leak the text message until a year later. We covered that when it happened. It wasn't quite a year later. What was it, 8 months later? We did a stupid little segment on that. What was it, a couple months ago? That came a while later, but he spoke out about why his relationship with Elon had fallen apart pretty much at the time, as we will see in just a second.
And completely consistent with the emails he recently released. There's no bombshell in there. If you read that first article, there's nothing that you saw in that said, oh, well, this is completely different from what he said. It's completely consistent with what he claimed went on between them.
Yes. And the other major point there that she tries to get in on him is that she said that he already had all of his materials at once. Therefore, he didn't have to maintain a relationship with Elon, whereas he said, no, that's not true. We were being fed materials on a rolling basis. But anyway, we can move on.
But the core issue from my perspective is not the specific timeline, which I completely accept. I may have misrepresented or misremembered. But But
if you misrepresented the timeline, that means you got your points wrong, because you are accusing him of withholding information about Elon for almost a full year. That's your whole point.
Right.
Your whole point is that he sat on damning information about Elon Musk for a long time. When if you're conceding that you got the timeline mixed up, then aren't you conceding the point? Why can't you just concede the point?
Right. And I got to say, good on Matt, man. Like, everyone commented with the Mehdi Hassan thing.
Yeah, that he got rolled.
He got rolled by Mehdi. He absolutely came into this prepared. I don't know if he got together with the most obnoxious prick he knows to train him for situations like this. But he handled himself very well. It was very different from okay, he's a nice guy. We've interviewed him twice. I met him once personally. Especially given what human ugliness he explores by nature of his job and the kinds of topics that interest him. He's surprisingly open and kind. And I think this kind of behavior takes him aback. But after what happened with Hassan, I think he's more prepared for it.
Statement in the text messages that you released between you and Elon Musk, in which you said, quote, Elon, I've repeatedly declined to criticize you, and I had nothing to do with your beef on Substack. So can you appreciate how people could read a statement like that and say, well, obviously at some point, Matt Taibbi had criticisms of Elon Musk that he chose not to make public. And maybe there's a very good journalism reason for you to think, I'm doing this so that I can get more Twitter files. That's completely reasonable, but that is also a negotiation, right?
Briahna, we'll get to that in a moment, but you also went into a whole tirade about how I waited a year to release the information that I had been censored, and that is just totally factually
Wait, so what I was
untrue.
referring to was that
You also
well, let me clarify.
invented-
Well, Matt Taibbi, I don't mean to argue with you. I have no investment. I have no interest in attacking you or making you look bad. If I got something wrong, let's talk about it. So what I was pointing to, and correct me if I'm wrong.
You got a lot wrong, and he is talking about it.
Yes,
and you want to
exactly.
move on.
Exactly.
These are,
you did an entire
lawyer
segment
tricks.
smearing a journalist's credibility.
Yeah.
And you just want to move on?
Yeah.
This doesn't have to be adversarial, Matt. What I was pointing to is the fact that these text messages are from April 10th of 2023. And the reporting on the text messages is from February 16th of 2024. That's the year gap that I'm referring to. So help me understand why is it that there was the release, the reporting on the title of this New Republic article, for instance, called Twitter Files. Matt Taibbi says Elon Musk sent him unhinged messages. That reporting happened in February of 2024. But the messages themselves are dated April of 2023, almost a year before.
But Briahna, you know this because, and again, I can't stress this enough. I know this because you've referenced the article that I wrote. The day that happened, I put out an article on my site called Meet the Censored: Me that detailed everything that happened, including the fact that I had been placed under a blanket search ban and that my own Twitter files had been taken down temporarily from Twitter. In fact, I had to explain this at some length to the audience so that they understood why I was uploading the Twitter files on my site, because they had been taken down from X. The only thing that was new about that article that you referenced was that I was trying to tweak Elon maybe into communicating by releasing the actual snapshots of the text exchange.
Okay, so the releasing of the snapshots was February 2024. I figured that was about a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, just based on when we covered it. But the piece that he came out with was not in February 2024. No. Meet the Censored Me came out last year at this time. So, Russell, you actually have some pieces of that article.
Yeah, okay. So this is where what she did here is just unconscionable.
Yeah, look at the date on that. Just look at the date on that.
All right. So this is from April 13th, right?
Yeah.
April 13th, 2023. This was right when this happened. So not only are we going to see that Taibbi laid out everything that happened other than to actually release the personal exchange, which he did later, but that exchange was completely consistent with what he said from the beginning. He was also pretty insulting towards Elon. It's not like he pulled his punches. So let's see what he said. So this is, he's describing all of a sudden his Twitter was cut off and he didn't have access and it was shadow banned. So I asked Substack co-head Hamish McKenzie what was going on. He said he wasn't sure, but offered that they just announced a new notes program the day before. I had to ask, what's that? I had no clue what Substack Notes was. As many unfortunately know now, my next move was to ask Elon what was going on. He didn't answer right away, which is fine. The man is busy, but the math on this was pretty simple. Whatever was going on between Twitter and Substack had nothing to do with me or with other Substack writers. And if Twitter was going to label our work unsafe and not allow us to share my articles, I couldn't endorse all this by using the platform and said so. This prompted a quick ping and a furious Signal question. So you want Substack to kill Twitter? I thought about asking him if he was okay. Substack is like 1,000 times smaller than Twitter, but figured that wouldn't go over well and tried a Socratic approach. What would he have me do if I couldn't share links and market my work? The answer? Post articles to Twitter instead, enabling a subscription plan. I would get more subscribers that way, I was told. This idea had come up about a month before, and I'd cheerfully declined, telling them I was happy where I was. I didn't think that had been a serious request, but now realized it might have been and tried to focus on the next line of text. All right, so you're dealing with a psycho. How do you get out of it, right?
Absolute psycho.
That's what he's
Could
describing.
you imagine being an established writer on a platform like Substack, which has proven to be a no bullshit free speech platform, not like Elon's, which is a fake free speech,
none of this Queen
nonsense.
of Hearts off with their heads bullshit. You never know day to day what the deranged CEO is going to do.
Exactly. You've got thousands of people supporting you on a tried and tested free speech platform that is inherent to long form video, audio, and written content, unlike Twitter. You're going to leave that platform to go and be a pioneer of this new subscription model on an ADD platform of quick scroll and character limited posts run by a guy who, depending on what side of the bed he wakes up on any given day, is either telling advertisers to go fuck themselves or flying to Israel to give Netanyahu a hand job. That's what you're going to do? Like, it is fucking insane to think. And there would be an ethical issue there as well,
which he gets into.
So we won't get into that now. But on top of the ethical issue, as a professional, you got to be out of your fucking mind to leave Substack for Twitter. Well,
you can see, he's put in this position where he's a journalist, which frankly Briahna has never been. Yes, she has been an opinion writer for various outlets, Current Affair, CNN, I think at one point, a couple of others, but she's not a journalist. She's not a journalist. She doesn't seem to understand what journalists do. Skipping over the part where it's weird and inappropriate to expect someone to leave a job, I moved to a more bottom line observation, namely that if I moved, quote, people would say I'm essentially an employee of Twitter, and both of us would never hear the end of it. Then and now I was genuinely trying to protect Elon from his own ideas. He didn't see it that way and said that was goodbye. Through a fatalistic laugh, I asked if this was because I wouldn't leave Substack, to which he reiterated it was because I'd chosen to, quote, support a company that wants to kill Twitter. So does he go easy on Elon? No. During this time, I was also performatively unfollowed. What grade are we in? And had my Signal exchanges posted. All this apparently because Elon somehow came to believe I was scheming to set aside work on the Twitter files to pursue my real goal, i.e. helping kill Twitter by working with a company a tiny fraction of its size to build a social media app I'd never heard of. I've done a lot of drugs and can't remember ever reaching that level of paranoia. The episode reminded me of Bananas, when Woody Allen's Fielding Mellish character toils with Marxist revolutionaries in a Central American jungle to change the system, only to see fearless leader General Emilio Molina Vargas lose his mind after seizing power. From this day on, the official language of San Marcos will be Swedish. All children under 16 years old are now 16 years old. My favorite gag in that is everyone has to change their underwear every hour and wear it on the outside so we can check.
Right.
You've never seen Bananas. Check it out. In doing all this, Elon immolated the last remnants of any reputation he had as a free speech advocate and gave immeasurable succor to the assorted David Brocks, AOCs, and Renee DiRestas who view him as an antichrist. All can now point to his outbursts of cartoon censorship and argue individual eccentric CEOs are the real danger to free expression, not squads of executives working in oligopolistic secrecy with the FBI, DHS, and 10 million Pentagon-funded centers for securing whatever. Oh, yeah, man. He hasn't said anything about this until now. He hasn't said anything about this. That is April 2023. Oh, yeah. I almost forgot. That wasn't the only thing he said about this. He also got together with a couple of schmucks and talked about how he thought, if you haven't seen this clip, we did an extended interview with him back in December. He talked about how he thought Elon Musk might have multiple personality disorders. Now, now the overall, what happened with him and Elon, he has talked before. As far as I know, we're the only ones who have Taibbi talking about his possible multiple personality disorders. So check it out.
Yes. But as clearly demonstrated there, who's pretty thorough in terms of his falling out with Elon and why, including some pretty harsh words for him, in April 2023. When that happened, that article was, 2-3 days after those text messages were sent?
Well, and he has been talking about this in every interview where it comes up for over a year. That's why I'm saying this is unconscionable. It's unconscionable that she said something like that.
Yeah, and to not just admit it, he says, I've been happy with a correction, right? Anyway, let's get back to it.
There's no new information in there except for some of his, behavioral stuff. But the stuff about the censorship, I quoted directly from that the day that it happened. So again, there's no substantive way you can claim that I held back any information about that incident until this year. I've been talking about it. The only reason I don't talk about it more is because I'm afraid of boring people about it.
I think we might be just confusing a couple of different things here. Of course, we covered and we've talked at length about the big blow up in and of itself about Substack and Elon having this kind of bizarre misunderstanding of what Substack was and feeling like it was somehow competing with Twitter and wanting you not to publish on your own Substack. Of course, we covered that, and that is not what I was referring to. As I just mentioned, I'm talking about this gap between the text, the obviously dissonant exchange that you were having with Elon Musk, in which you articulated a concern that you had been withholding criticisms of Elon Musk, and he didn't seem to be kind of responding to that. Yeah.
That's a different thing, and that's not what you were saying in your show. You were saying that I held back from the world, that an influential journalist had been censored. Go back and listen to this.
Wait a minute,
look at the
but that's what I'm referring
show.
to. I'm referring to your quote here, and I wonder if you could just, because I think it might be a little boring for the audience for it to become some interpersonal dispute between us. And also, I
understand you want to move on to this other thing, but that's not what happened.
I specifically quoted.
I would have.
Yeah, so once again, just completely misrepresenting the timeline. We don't have to go over it again, but we laid it out for you right there. All right, so now he says, look, I'd have been happy with a simple retraction, right? But since you're not going to give that to me, here they go again.
I've been happy with a correction, but since you're not going to do that, okay. The other two were, you were saying that essentially that I had done searches only for one side and not the other.
Well, Matt, let's talk about that. I didn't say you had done searches for one side or the other. I said I had you on my show, and you got very bristly with me at that time as well. I wish we could have these conversations without them turning into these weird personal vendettas. I think we'd.
He did not get bristly with you. You got bristly with him. You kept on absolutely insisting, talking about his first appearance on her show after the Twitter files. She kept insisting that there was evidence of left suppression that she strongly implied he had intentionally, willfully overlooked, or at the very least been incompetent in not looking for it. And he answered her quite rightly. I think the reason we didn't find it is because they don't consider the left that kind of a threat. So they didn't bother to do that to the left.
Yeah, but the key thing is, yes, that's all true. But the key thing is what he says here.
Have a lot more productivity in this space if we did.
Let's not have
but
any
wait a minute. Robbie, this is not necessary for you to intervene at this juncture. What I said to you on my show was I asked you if you had ever done a search about Bernie Sanders specifically and censorship against the left kind of Bernie Sanders movement back in 2016. And you seemed, and I wish we had pulled up a clip, but people can go and look for it on themselves on Bad Faith Podcast, but you seemed almost kind of surprised and caught off guard by that question. And you answered truthfully, no. And I said, well, that seems to me from my own subjective political interest. They don't have to be interests that you share, obviously. But from my own subjective political interest as a leftist, a kind of curious choice. Is that not accurate?
First of all, that's just a ridiculous formulation. From my subjective political interest as a leftist, it seemed like a curious choice for you not to seek out censorship of the left. Now, what he answers here is very important, and then we'll talk more.
Well, yes, but you're implying that I was looking in the other direction and not in that direction. I wasn't looking in either direction.
I said a factual statement, which was that you.
Okay, that is lawyer bullshit. Of course, you implied that he put into his search suppression of Donald Trump, anti-Trump censorship, and didn't because he is biased in favor of the right wing, according to this insinuation that you're trying to make, didn't decide to do the same search anti-Bernie sentiment. Of course, you're implying that he searched for anti-right-wing censorship, but not anti-left-wing censorship. What he actually did was run a search of the agencies who were doing the censoring and found that they more often censored the right than the left. You know why they more often censored the Trump right than the Bernie left? Because Trump is a winner and Bernie Sanders is a pathetic fucking loser. That's why. And that is what Briahna Joy Gray refuses to accept. Look, we have praised Briahna Joy Gray plenty on this show.
Recently.
She is amazing on a lot of topics, including the topic of our time. Okay? But there is a common thread. There is a common thing that shows itself throughout all of her stupid bullshit takes.
You're a rich girl, and you're going too far, 'cause you know it don't matter anyway.
Well, that's not it. That's not what I was going for. The common thread in all of her bullshit takes.
That was Taibbi. We called him. That was the quote he gave us.
Exactly. Yeah. Is a refusal to admit defeat. A refusal to admit that the left is not as powerful as she thinks it ought to be because she's a competitor. She's a lawyer. Lawyers are paid to go out and win. But commentators and journalists have to prioritize the truth above everything else. And whether it's comparing construction paper to talk about, biological women versus trans women, or whether it is trying to accuse Matt Taibbi of somehow seeking out anti-right-wing censorship instead of anti-left-wing censorship, where she gets in trouble is when that very competitive streak in her takes priority over what is just plainly true. And what's plainly true is that there was more censorship against the right in 2020 than there was against the left, because Trump was the president and was going to be re-elected handily, if not for the pandemic. And Bernie Sanders, cuck that he was, lost the primary after the party conspired against him and stuck his tail in between his legs and endorsed his good friend Joe and said, we have to have the guts to stand up to the billionaires but vote for Joe Biden. Who would censor that? Who would censor? What is That's not a threat to anybody. Why the fuck are they going to censor that? Why are they going to censor that? He's irrelevant. The people on his campaign are fucking irrelevant, and that includes you, Briahna. To the extent that you were a Bernie Sanders operative, you lost. And look, I understand. Losing sucks. Eating shit sucks. I'm a very competitive person. I was kicked out of my 4th birthday party because I lost the pin the tail of the donkey and I had a tantrum because I couldn't believe it was so embarrassing that on my own birthday I had lost. So I had a fit. I couldn't handle it. I know what it's like to be a competitive person, and I know how much it hurts to lose. You don't think we were all pissed off that we lost those Bernie campaigns? But you have to admit that you lost, and you have to admit that Bernie Sanders sold the movement out and therefore constituted no threat to any institutional power whatsoever. So, of course, there would be more censorship of the Trump right than of the Bernie left. The Trump right had power. They had power. They had actually scared the shit out of these agencies. Bernie Sanders was no threat to anybody. And he made that point on your show. And as Russell just said, you got bristly with him when he brought that up, not the other way around. And now you're suggesting that the reason the Twitter files didn't uncover more bombshells about anti-Bernie censorship is because he didn't look. No, it's because it wasn't there, because Bernie Sanders is a fucking jackass.
Yes. And something else you see throughout this that, we'll get into it a little more when we look at my tweet about this. Something that I have no patience for is the poor little rich girl routine. You attacked and smeared this guy. You decided to revive these accusations about the Twitter files that you had been roundly criticized for and rebuked for a year ago. You decide to take this as an opportunity, in keeping with what Keaton's saying. You couldn't just take the L. You had to
just take the
bring
L.
this
It happens.
back into the public square and relitigate the Twitter files again. And throughout this, you play the victim. Oh, we don't have to make this a personal thing. What could be more personal than these repeated attacks you've been making on how he handled the Twitter files? That is personal. That is very personal. And by this time, you have no excuse. By this time, you know better. You've been educated about this by many people who actually have chops as journalists, unlike yourself. So you have no excuse now. Ignorance. You cannot plead ignorance. And to say, okay, concede, but that's no. That doesn't work. And kudos to Matt. He doesn't let her get away with it. But this is what she always does. She'll take, even when she takes a good stand, she has to go cry about people being mean to me on Twitter. Well, why don't you go, hey, they pay $20 an hour now. Why don't you go work at Internet? Okay? If it's that hard on you, Briahna. Otherwise, you're living a pretty good life. Shut the fuck up about how people get mean to you on Twitter.
All right, we got more.
Admitted that you hadn't searched specifically for kind of Bernie-related material.
That is
That's
true,
all I
but
said, right?
But I wasn't looking for information on the right either. I was looking at the DHS, FBI, ODNI, the Global Engagement Center, the Election Integrity Partnership.
Like
those are the kinds of searches
journalist?
I was doing. The stuff that was turning up is the stuff that was turning up. And just to get this out of the way, you also said that I hadn't reported on this issue. I've only reported on this issue in one direction. That I haven't. That mainstream media. There aren't people in mainstream media who are doing coverage of this issue from the concerns of the left side. I've been doing that for years. I've been constantly writing about censorship of figures on the left.
Yeah, I think
Even
you're right about that, Matt. But if I could articulate, I think what the concern is and what Zed was saying and what others have been saying, it's because you've done so much of that good reporting. And I said this in the episode last time. It's because you've done so much of that reporting from the left perspective that is so important and so valuable in the left sphere that there is a frustration that reporting hasn't seemed to continue since the last few years or so. And so
you have the right to be frustrated about that, but that does not impugn his work. Like, I understand you probably wish that he were digging around for, examples of the Bernie movement being screwed over. Okay, well, I mean, you can wish he did that more. You're free to wish that, but that does not impugn his work. The fact that he chose to do a broader, and I would argue more important, search of where these agencies saw their place to actually go in and interfere with the speech rights of anyone, left or right. And as he mentions, there was some examples of left suppression uncovered in those searches. That's what he felt was more important to do. You can be frustrated about it. That's your right to be frustrated about it, but that doesn't have anything to do with him. No, she's upset. She's upset that this person who she used to see as on her team is now doing something that is not specifically serving the interests of her political sect, which has become irrelevant, which is the Bernie, DSA, Social Democrat left, which has failed at every single possible turn. Okay, and if you want to take that up with somebody, try Bernie Sanders, right? He had the choice to fall in line or continue fighting his quote-unquote revolution, and he caved. So take it up with him. Don't start telling journalists it's their responsibility to give you the emotional gratification that comes with feeling you got screwed over. We all know the Bernie movement got screwed over. That doesn't make it his responsibility to prove that to you in these searches. Anyway, let's keep going.
Well, not only that. I mean, if I'm remembering correctly, and I think I am, they went through 100,000 emails. What was there was there. That's journalism. They went through what they had, and they reported on what they found. I don't even understand why she's still talking about this.
Because
do you
she hates to
understand what
lose.
journalists do? Do you understand what they do? They were given this, and by all accounts, they thoroughly went through everything. If that evidence had been there, they would. Do you think he wouldn't have reported it? Like, do you think he's suppressing it? I don't think she believes that. So if you don't believe that, shut up. What are you even talking about at this point?
I'm telling you, it's because she hates to lose. She's a competitor. She's a lawyer. Lawyers get paid to win. They fucking hate to lose, and I get it. I hate to lose, but sometimes you lose. So rather than deny that or try and rationalize that or try and come up with some sort of excuse for that over and over again, even when it comes to suggesting that this guy didn't do his job right, when what his job had nothing to do with your hurt feelings over the waste of time that was the Bernie Sanders campaign, you should just take the L and move on. Lawyers don't get paid to do that. And I think that is why she runs into these problems.
when you DM'd me about your concerns about what I said, but Matt, when you DM'd me about your concerns about the last segment, you linked several articles, the most recent of which was from 2022. There was another from 2018.
Sure, the one about the labor files was just a few months ago, and that was a huge series that I invested a lot in. The Twitter files themselves were full of material about the left. But let's
talk about it. Maybe I just am not aware of it. What Twitter file materials is full were germane to the interests of the left? I'd love to hear about them.
The issue with consortium, for instance.
What's the issue with consortium?
What difference does that even make? He goes on and gives an answer about consortium
this is
and NewsGuard.
very interrogative, like a lawyer, not like an interview.
Well, what about the Twitter files was germane to the interests of the left? How irrelevant is that to the substance of the story? It's completely irrelevant. And the answer I wish he'd have given is censorship is germane to the issues of the left, as was proven after October 7th when the left actually posed a threat because those student groups were actually disrupting the narrative that the media was putting forward about the Israel-Gaza war, and they were censored when they posed a threat. The students for Gaza posed a threat. The ceasefire protesters threatened the system in a way that Bernie dipshit fucking Sanders never could and never would. And so censorship as a whole is an issue germane to the left. But beyond that, it's an irrelevant, it's a stupid question. Like it's such a stupid and petty crybaby thing to ask. Well, what did you do for me? What was in the Twitter files for me? What was in it for you is not his problem. If you're not interested in the story, don't be interested. Don't cover it. Don't talk about it. But you don't have to piss on it just because it doesn't serve your specific DSA Bernie Sanders movement's interest in the short term. It's not his responsibility to do that.
Right. And if you look at his reporting, this was right around when we interviewed him, because right afterwards he did that event in Brooklyn. And he was going out basically to preach the evangel of, hey, you've got these shadowy organizations working with the government to ban you. And he was doing a slideshow showing CISA. And in terms of relevance to the left, he was involved in the reporting on NewsGuard, which was funded by the Pentagon, and doing ratings that did affect the left, rating left sites like Consortium News as unreliable. So he has done that. So if you're going to do a segment, you need to know what you're talking about, especially if you're going to make these kinds of accusations, and they are accusations. You're making accusations against Matt Taibbi of having a bias that he brought into the Twitter files and of basically serving the right. She's not saying it the way that Galani said it, but she's reinforcing, she's building on that. She's going with Galani's premise, right? That he's been captured by a right-wing audience. She doesn't say that straight out like Galani does, but it's implied in everything that she's saying. And it's not even true on the face of it, as he's pointing out. I'm a subscriber. I know what he reports. He does report things about the left wing, but he also reports things about conservatives. We used to call that fucking journalism. That shouldn't surprise you if you read Hate Inc., in which Taibbi really kind of laments that the media has become so bifurcated and lost that principle of journalism simply being follow the facts, follow them wherever they go.
Exactly.
About
and then we're going to have
Bari
to wrap,
Weiss.
so can you get in one more thing?
Bari Weiss making a very different decision than you, obviously. She criticized, I think, kind of mildly.
Okay, this is the other totally dishonest thing. Okay, here we go. So now she talks about Bari Weiss had a falling out with Elon. She stood up to him. Why didn't you?
Elon Musk's choice to censor the Elon Jets account and was immediately booted from the project. Did you feel like that was a sort of an intimidating warning across the bow? And did you consider whether there could have been a kind of collective effort to say, okay, well, if you're going to fire Bari Weiss from this project, you'll have to fire all of us because we agree with the value that Bari Weiss is standing up for right now, which is that you have to either be for free speech broadly and universally or not.
When the thing with Barry happened, look, we were all texting each other, but frankly, Briahna, for me, this is not a difficult calculation. Standing up to Elon Musk, let's say we all stood up to Elon Musk. We stood as one. We rose as one and said, we will not do this story unless you repudiate, you stand up for free speech. And then he booted us all off and we never got any Twitter files, which is what happened after he got in a spat with me. What would the value of that have been? It would have been zero. The Twitter files was a historically important story, and I'm sorry. As a journalist,
do you regret arguing with him about the Substack then, and perhaps being able to get more out of the Twitter files? Because eventually you had your own line, right?
There's nothing I could have done about the Substack thing. They came to me and said, "Do you want to move to Twitter subs?" And I said no, because there was an ethical problem there. And frankly, I was trying to protect the reporting. I would have moved to Twitter subs if there wasn't an ethical issue there. If I did do that, people would have said that I had a financial relationship to Elon Musk, and they would have invalidated all the reporting. So I couldn't do it. I was put into a yes or no situation. I had to say no, and when I said no, that was the end.
Yeah, so that's important. So it was, the way she presents that is, well, you eventually had your ethical or moral red line with Elon, where you stood up to him because he was going to force you to abandon Substack for X. And what he's saying is, no, I didn't stand up to him and say enough is enough. I'm staying with Substack, and that means we're done, the way Barry Weiss stood up to him. He's saying, look, I had to keep this guy happy for as long as I could because I'm dealing with a total fucking man-child who just happens to be sitting on a treasure trove of important information. Right. He knew that once it came to, if and when it came to Elon giving him the ultimatum, either leave Substack or lose the files, he was going to have to lose the files because he couldn't leave Substack. So he got everything he could have gotten out of Elon. Right. There's no more he could have gotten out of it because he kept his mouth shut until Elon gave him the ultimatum. When Elon gave him the ultimatum, he chose to stay with Substack, and that was the end of the line, and there was nothing he could do about it. He didn't choose to take a moral stand later than Barry Weiss, which was Briahna's 100% incorrect accusation.
Yeah, well, you can see, like a lawyer, she's trying to get him to contradict himself. She's trying to, she's grilling him. She's grilling him like a witness. She's not interviewing him like a guest. She as you say, she needs to win, and she's relitigating something she humiliated herself with over a year ago. That's what this is about. She just decided to open this whole subject up again because this Substack note of Taibbi's had gained some traction.
Right.
So,
and what do you say to the Palestine criticism, just quickly? Because that was a big part of what Zed Galani was arguing about, that he feels like you were so amazing on Palestine years ago, but haven't been as vocal about it post October 7th.
Amazing on Palestine. I've never written about Palestine except in the context of censorship, which I have written about repeatedly.
But I think that's the issue. In contemporary censorship, do you have any thoughts on that quickly before we wrap?
Yeah, as I've always said, the Palestinians are pretty much the canary in the coal mine for any new form, any new censorship technology. And, we saw it started as early as 2014, 2015 with the internet stuff, and it's only gotten worse. It's going to get worse. But that's the template that I'm worried about happening here. But it's not like I haven't said anything about that. I have repeatedly.
Okay, we're going to play the end of this video in just a second, but I do want to chime in here because if she actually wanted to do a tough, hard-hitting segment, she should have just asked that question first and then had a conversation about Palestine and the censorship around that. Because when Russ and I last interviewed Matt, we noticed that he hadn't written about that as much as we had hoped he would, frankly. And when we were gaming out the interview questions, we talked to each other about, hey, okay, so we want to start with the campus protests issue because that's the most important issue of the day. This was December 6th. I think we had him on. And we are assuming we got about 90 minutes, so we're planning on spending about 20 minutes on, the ceasefire protest groups being shut down and get his take on that. And we asked ourselves and each other, we've noticed he's been a little quiet about this, maybe because he's made friends with Barry Weiss, right? And so there's a chance he might stonewall about us with this. There's a chance he might try and change the subject or dodge the question. And if he does that, we're going to have to force the issue. Like, we can't we like the guy, but we can't let him wiggle out of that. This is the most important issue of our time. We're leading with this. So if he tries to duck us, it's going to get a little uncomfortable. We were a little nervous about that. Turns out we ended up having the exact opposite problem. Half hour into the interview, we're still talking about the Palestine issue, to the point where I'm texting Russell, okay, we have to move on. We have other topics. And Russell, of course, ignored it and asked him another Palestine question, another Palestine question, another Palestine question. We ended up talking about Palestine for almost an hour. So I wish he had written about it more. I think that's valid to ask him, why haven't you written about it more, and get his takes on that. But when we asked him about it, he was very forthcoming. He criticized Douglas Murray. He criticized Israel. He said Israel's acting the same way we did after 9/11, where we are conflating opposition to Israel's war policies with being some sort of terrorist sympathizer. Like, he was pretty good with what he told us, and he wasn't shy about it, and he didn't try to duck it or keep a short answer. We talked for almost an hour about it. And he ended up giving us 2.5 hours, so it's not like it cut into other time. We were a little nervous about that going in, but luckily he seemed to have passed that test in terms of our interview.
And I will say, as somebody who's followed his work for years, that has never been a focus of his writing. That's not really what he does. He's not an international reporter. He's really, more in keeping with journalists like Thomas Wolfe, an observer of American life and American institutions.
Basically, media criticism,
he's
financial corruption,
journalist.
And censorship. Those are his three beats: media criticism, financial corruption, and free
Palestine's
speech
not his beat, but when he was asked about it, he wasn't slippery. He wasn't scared. He shared my first article about it after October 7th on his Substack, which was very much arguing
a full-throated defense of the protests, right? Yeah,
right. It was a defense of the protests, and he promoted that article, which I was very appreciative of. So it's just another in a series of very dishonest attempts to smear him, to make him look bad, to get him on his back heel. This is not an interview. This is an interrogation. She put him on the witness stand, and she keeps trying to trip him up. And like I say, I'm joking about it, but it seems like he practiced with somebody. It really does. Like after Hassan, he decided, if I'm going to keep doing these kinds of interviews that are hostile, I need to be more prepared for that.
He probably went to right-wing debate school. Probably went to, did a PragerU.
He went to PragerU.
PragerU crash course. All right, last bit about this. She tries to continue the conversation.
Matt, thank you so much for coming here. Set the record straight. We really appreciate it, and we've loved.
I'm just going to say, look at her fucking face. She is fucking furious. She's furious. Why is she furious? Because she knows that she didn't get the best of him. She knows she came off badly in this. And she can't just be like, my bad.
Having you on and featuring your reporting in the past.
And I'm happy to continue this conversation with you at length over on Bad Faith Podcast if you're ever interested. I really have no interest in getting things wrong, and I do appreciate you coming here to clarify. Thanks again.
Look at that. She's furious with him. Why? Because you were wrong. You can't be wrong. So this was just disgusting. You have anything else before I get into my tweet?
Nope.
All right. So I had my own take on this, and you know what? A lot of people weighed in, mostly positively. Some people were questioning my language, and I've had this debate back and forth with some of the people on our site over the years, who I affectionately call simps. So I said on this, all right, simps, tell me again how Briahna isn't dangerously dumb and fundamentally dishonest. Now, I was talking to Keaton about this, and he actually was questioning what I mean by dumb when I say that.
Well, because you misspoke originally. You said she was, at first you said she was fundamentally dumb, and I don't agree. I think she's fundamentally pretty smart. But I think what you meant to say was functionally dumb. Meaning that because she's so biased and because she's so hyper-competitive to a fault, she ends up saying the same things that a dumb person would say, even though she's not.
And that is exactly right. That is exactly what I mean. And I thought about this, like, well,
but you misspoke the first time. You said fundamentally dumb. That's why I was confused.
Okay, so I'm explaining.
Admit it. You were wrong. Admit you were wrong. Admitted.
Well, admit you were wrong about DeSantis. I
I'll
kept
settle
saying
a
there's
correction.
no way he's going to be the nominee.
I will be fine with a simple correction, and then we can move on. Will you issue a correction?
I issue a correction.
Yeah,
what I meant
see how easy that is? You see how easy that
easy.
is, everybody? You
It is
issue a
easy.
correction.
That's
Issue a
it.
correction.
That's what she could have done, and then they would have gone out for blueberry scones or something. But
Right.
instead, I
Right.
don't know that they're ever going to appear on anything together after that. This is what I mean. Look, I grew up on the street, and the people that I knew on the street were some of the most creative, funny, interesting, philosophical, outside the box people I've ever known to this day. When I went to college, the first thing that struck me was how boring and stupid everybody was by my standards. Now, this is the difference between book smart and street smart, right? From a street smart perspective, when I went to college, everyone struck me as stupid. Honestly, it's a sensibility that's never really left me. I'm not trying to make it out that everyone on the street is a noble savage. There was a lot of attitudes I didn't agree with and ideas that I didn't like. I'm not trying to say, oh, everything was great. It was a paradise with street lights and beer. I'm not saying that, but there's definitely a difference. There's a street smart and a book smart. And when I look at somebody like Briahna, obviously she's not what you might call congenitally stupid, meaning there's nothing wrong with her brain. She has a very good brain, but she's functionally stupid. And a lot of people who are very book smart are like that. They're functionally stupid. To go a little further than what Keaton's saying with the competitiveness, I don't think it's just that. Really looking at why did people strike me this way in college so much? I think it's because when you come from kind of a rougher environment, it's very Robert De Niro in The Deer Hunter. This is this. This is this. And a lot of times people who have had it soft are much more programmed. So it's like a feral animal looking at a domesticated animal. You can see how soft their mind is, how open to programming it is, how very often they can't see this is this. They just can't see that. And that's how you wind up with somebody who incontrovertibly has the equipment to think, who would literally say the difference between someone who identifies as a woman and somebody who's actually born as a woman is no greater than the difference between two shades of construction paper because they're both paper. That's stupid. That is Forrest Gump level stupid. To say she said things like that in other contexts and other places about the same subject.
The same thing.
It was not just there. No, because there's a dimension of it where in the end, she is from this PMC background. And if you signal to her the right kind of cultural signaling, she's going to align with it because she's programmed. She's programmed. Why did she take that position in the first place? Now you're arguing she made such a stupid. You're arguing she created such a stupid metaphor because she's competing. Why did she invest in this belief system to begin with?
Because that's the belief system of the left, and she wants the left to win, and she sees the left
of a PMC subsection of the left of which she is a part.
Yeah,
and that is stupid. To me, doesn't have to be stupid to everybody. To me, you're stupid if you can't see how irrational that belief is. She is, and the other part of what I said.
I believe she does see it.
I
believe
think so.
She was stretching to make a case there.
Maybe, but the underlying belief that she's representing there, she said it in too many places for it to just be that she's competing. She is programmed to accept these kinds of liberal formulations as long as you present it to her in the right way. Somebody said to us, I don't know, I haven't checked it, I can't verify it. They said that she was recommending 1619 Project. Again, I don't know if it's true, but it would be consistent with what I know of her. We know that historians have come out and said that's historically inaccurate. But if you represent things to her in a certain cultural strata, she's programmed. She's programmed to accept those ideas. And she's also fundamentally dishonest in terms of the other part of what I said very recently. And I've been trying not to get into this, right? I mean, because usually there's just no point. I don't need to keep like beating up on somebody who I don't respect. Like I can just drop the subject, which I have been trying to do. In fact, I've been bending over backwards, like that Marianne segment. I really didn't bring any of these things up, just nothing but praise, because who needs it? Like I'm not seeking that kind of drama. But now it came up in a way that's relevant to bring up. Why do I think that it is better not to elevate her? Because for every good position she takes, she makes the left look ridiculous with the next position she takes. So it is not good to have somebody like that representing you. And, it has been suggested to me, and I think there might be something to it. In the end, you got a lot of working class people. Again, it's that peasant mind. You know what? You don't need PMCs to represent you. You don't need to kiss ass on people who presume to speak for your class, even though they've never been a part of it. That's what you get when you elevate people like that to speak for the working class. They embarrass you. They embarrass you. They wind up, in the end, they don't have your interests and they don't have your perspective. And for everything they say that you're going to like, in the end, they're going to sell you out, man. In the end, they're not with you. They don't think like you. They don't know people like you. They don't associate with people like you. They don't hang with people like, they might employ people like you, but they're not with you. The other day, this was very typical. She took a good position on the Scottish hate speech bill and then completely misrepresented J.K. Rowling. So that's why I say it's not just the construction paper. Everywhere she talks about those kinds of very liberal, identitarian subjects, she never questions the narrative. That, to me, is stupid. Now, you say the way that she goes about debating it is her competitiveness. Okay. But the belief itself is stupid. It is fundamentally stupid to me. To me, I think you're stupid if you are that open to that kind of programming. That's what I call dumb. It doesn't mean her brain is dumb, but you might as well be Forrest Gump if that's what comes out the other end.
Right. Well, that's what I said. That's what I said. But like I said, I believe that it is all born of a competitive streak where she sees this as a binary struggle between the right and the left. She's got this pasty fucking white boy on here bringing up stories left and right about Target boycott because of dick tucking pajamas, and she's sick of that, and she doesn't want to hear that, and she thinks it's ridiculous. And I agree with her that a lot of that is fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, but she's ridiculous on the other side.
But because that's the game. That's the game, right? And I'm not defending it, but that's my explanation for it. I think she is a Harvard-educated lawyer who gets paid to win, and she likes to win, and that to me is the source of it. But whatever. I mean, I don't particularly care how smart she is or how not smart she is. I don't particularly care about her as a representative.
So
I
wanted to address it.
I understand that, but I'm just saying I don't particularly care about her as a representative, as a person. I mean, she's not running for office, for anything. Like when she undresses, what's his name? What's the guy, the Epstein guy, the old guy, the lawyer, the guy, the Zionist.
Dershowitz. She had Dershowitz.
Yeah. When she undresses Dershowitz, not literally, that would be pretty gross. But when she picks him apart, I'm happy to give her credit for it when she does something like this. I'm happy to call her out for it. I don't consider her a representative of the left any more than I would consider myself a representative for the left, where when I say something that people think is worth sharing, they should share it. If I say something that people don't like, they should give me as much shit for it as they want. That's their right. Well, so I don't really look at it in that way. I'll take it on a case-by-case basis.
Well, nobody's suggesting we should censor Briahna. I am just saying, because very often you have what I would call.
No, you're saying she shouldn't be a representative. I'm saying she's not. Like, I mean, fine, but she's not a representative. I'm saying
don't. Well, for a lot of people, she is, and I'm telling those people who I affectionately call simps, don't elevate her.
Well, you shouldn't
Don't
elevate
elevate
anybody. I mean, you shouldn't elevate us.
Well,
I mean, you shouldn't.
you
shouldn't elevate
no,
anybody.
us, you should.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't elevate anybody. To
You
that
should
point,
elevate
in all
me.
seriousness.
You should
Yeah, elevate
me.
Russell.
Keaton's a little unpredictable.
I mean, nobody. I mean, you shouldn't defend anybody, no matter what. If we say something that pisses you off, you should let us know. Many of you have. You're right. That's fine.
Well, I guess what I'm saying overall is Briahna sucks, and the good moments that she has are just not worth the toenails. I have compared her to a great meal with toenails in it. It's not worth the toenails.
See, I don't really agree.
With this exchange, it tipped it for me into it's just not worth the toenails.
I mean, but what? But how
every person has to decide that for themselves. I can't decide that for another person. That's my opinion.
But I don't understand the formulation of, okay, if she has Marianne on where she picked her apart in that last interview, what are you saying? We shouldn't.
Somebody else.
We shouldn't cover that because she did it.
No, I'm not saying.
Okay,
that.
so there you're saying. So you're saying. So we're not elevating her. We're giving her credit when she's right, and we're giving her a hard time when she's wrong.
Cover it. It's our job. I'm saying if I am a casual viewer, I'm not a patron of Brianna's, and I'm only going to watch her on the occasions that she does something like the Marianne or the Dershowitz thing.
All right.
She's not, hey, this comes up because whenever she comes up, how many chats do we get? No, she didn't mean that. All right, so I'm addressing that.
All right.
This is what I'm saying.
Okay, fine. But that's a little different from what I'm saying. I'm saying, yeah, fine. No, nobody should defend everybody no matter what. You shouldn't defend us no matter what. All right. All right, let's...
No, they should defend us no matter what. And what I'm saying is we evaluate people all the time. Jesus Christ, we built the fucking channel on fucking ripping apart another channel. Like, we evaluate people. And I'm saying evaluating this person. It's not that there can't be good work here and there, but... you have to remember who you're dealing with. And while here and there, that might be a good segment to really go out there and defend this person or elevate this person.
I mean, I don't,
because I think when you're doing that, you are elevating them. Yo, man, you've been here for it. I didn't do it with Tusker, man, where you got 10 people defending Briahna. That's what I'm talking about. Like, don't defend her like that.
I mean,
if here and there you got a good segment, fine. Yeah, sure, we'll cover it. I think the space would be better off without her. I think somebody maybe with better views who's not as much of a dishonest hypocrite would fill that void and do those jobs, and you really don't need her to do it. That's my opinion.
Please clap.